interpret it differently.
But there's a limit to how much you can interpret.
What I'm saying is, if Allah provided this the perfect, then surely there would be one interpretation of it. If it was that perfect, like you wouldn't, like, I wouldn't give my child something that is like so precious, and give it to someone and they drop it and it breaks, and then it just distorts the whole image of it. And so that's what you've seen going through. So unless Muhammad is here communicating it himself, no one can say this is the correct interpretation. I was basically trying to get to the point of it's still a faith.
I'll tell you why this is unlike other religious or traditions from other cultures.
Yeah.
In Islam, whatever has been transmitted to the Prophet as a revelation, as he dictated to them, he was also a living example of what he meant. Okay? That is why the Prophet ﷺ has been described as a walking Quran. Why? He exemplified, he materialized after internalizing the Quran and show it to the people what it means. So when, for example, it says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, say Allah is one, of course he explained to them what this oneness is. The language itself is clear. Now if someone now comes today and says it means one means two, for example, where are they getting this from? This is an interpretation, but obviously it's a wrong one. So what is the correct interpretation? The correct interpretation, of course, is interpretation which the Quran interprets itself. Al-Qur'anu yufassiru ba'duha ba'd. The Quran explains part of it by itself, other parts. Okay? This is the primary mode of interpretation. The Prophet explained the Quran. The Prophet lived the Quran. And the companions and the students of the Prophet, who was given the Quran, the recipients of the revelation, they understood it. If they didn't, they asked what it meant. So we have occasions where they asked, what is Abba? What is this word Abba in the Quran? And it was explained to them. So because the Quran came in a language which is very eloquent, not everyone in the street knows high-level language of that particular language. All the eloquence, words and phrases of the language. You don't expect a street dweller, for example, a person in the street, to come up with the highest level of eloquence in the linguistic of that language, because they may not have that vocabulary within their, the corpus, their frame of vocabulary. So they may not have heard this word, but others may have. So that's why the Quran words and phrases, if they were not understood, they were explained to the people that they understood it. The best understanding, the best explanation, the best interpretation is by the Prophet himself through the Quran. Yeah? So he explains it, and the Quran says, okay, this is the best interpretation.
But then what I'm saying is, you can read this, and it's not in chronological order. Sometimes it's hard to know who's speaking to who and how, etc., etc. Some of the stories aren't complete, or it might mention someone, but you kind of have to. How do you find out who that person is? And so what I was told is that the hadith and the hadith then help you to interpret.
Let's take that.
So my whole point was, the whole point is that if it was the perfect word as it was said, surely you should be able to read that and receive, etc.
The level of expectation that you are asking for is a level where the Quran is not going to be this book.
Yeah.
The Quran would be every single book on planet Earth altogether.
Yeah.
Why? Because
that
is the level of detail, but that's not how the Quran is. Quran is a book of guidance in a way that it is sufficient. For example,
so therefore, like I'm saying here, faith still plays a strong role in it.
Not faith. Let me explain. When the Quran says, he begets not, nor was he begotten, in the same chapter we're discussing. Now, the Quran does not need to tell you all the people in the past or all the people in the future who have this belief that God has a father, mother, brother, uncle, whatever, a progeny or lineages, like fathers and forefathers. It doesn't need to. It is simply telling you he hasn't got any lineage and he doesn't have any forefathers or fathers. Simple.
But does it say that around that whole context?
No.
Says it?
The statement that God is one, he's self-sufficient,
he begets
and he does not beget, or nor is he begotten, it is sufficient enough to refute or reject all understanding in which God is a child of someone, or God has parents and so on. You don't need to know the history about the Romans and the Greeks and the Christians and the Hindus of all these godfathers and godmothers and godchildren. This is the level of succinct conciseness of the Quran, which explains it to a level that you understand that yes, God is a being who doesn't have any parents or lineages.
It denies the Trinitarian idea of God.
Any.
But you could, so that's fine, and that's fine. But then if I take other verses that
give an example.
Maybe are aggressive towards polytheists, Christians, aggressive. Yeah, in terms
what do you
of
mean by aggressive?
Okay, don't take them as allies, for example, Christians and the Jews.
Isn't that a praiseworthy statement?
No, but no, don't take them as allies.
Yes. Isn't that a statement that you should say, I agree 100%?
Right.
Okay. What is an ally?
Don't take them as allies.
Yes. The Quran says, gives a general statement of command to the Muslims. Do not take Jews and the Christians as allies. Besides Muslims, right? Don't take them as your allies. What is an ally?
Wait, do you know where that is in there?
I can find it easily if you want.
But it's
Fine.
An ally is someone that you align yourself with in a particular cause.
When we're done with him,
Yeah, sure.
and the topic over there is like the Sunnah is out of Quran. So I want you to see if you have
Maybe inshallah. Okay.
allies to
Right.
each other.
Brother. Sorry.
It says do not take
So allies, what is an
It also says they're the closest among those in love, etc., etc. Yes, so this is my point.
The one he's talking about, though, it says, don't take the Jews and Christians allies because they are allies to each other. One of the sheikhs said that's only those Judeo Christian
But
Yeah, a sheikh. That's what I'm saying. So
Listen,
do you understand what I'm saying?
my friend,
Sorry.
what is an ally?
An ally is someone that you align yourself with in a particular cause, for a particular cause, or you trust them.
You
Generally, you'd
They are your
associate with
protecting.
whom you do something.
They are your protecting, supporting, helping friend.
Yeah.
For example, how America is an ally to some country, right?
Yeah.
For example, looks after them, protects them, takes care of them,
particular cause.
preserve them, right? Now, would you expect a polytheist to do the same to the Muslim? Of course not. Because Islam is about what? Against idolatry, against worship of more than one God. So someone who worships more than one God would never take you someone who will give you good advice. Never, impossible. Impossible. So to trust them will be making a mistake. It will be a mistake of judgment. Brother, don't bring Bible in. It's irrelevant. It will be a mistake of judgment. You cannot rely on someone who's not going to give you good advice. Absolutely not. So the Quran doesn't say, don't take them as your friends. It says allies who are protecting, supporting those who will look after your affairs and so on. And it's quite logical. You do not expect, for example, when the Cold War was happening between America and Soviet Union, they don't take one another as allies. They don't, because they are against their own interests. You cannot, logically speaking, you cannot have allies for one another. So likewise, Islam and anything goes against Islam, they cannot be allies of each other. It's impossible.
Yes, I understand.
So that is what Islam says. You cannot take them. But Islam says, as you said, it doesn't stop you from, having good relations with them, being one with conducting, being in ma'ruf, having a fair and good and just relationship with them. Doesn't matter. As long as they don't fight you and drive you out of your homes or plot to kill you and so on. So Islam is not against a relationship between people based on this fairness and justice and mutual.
Can I say, I gave that example, just as an example of something that someone could maybe interpret differently, or it doesn't necessarily explain exactly the whole context. So again, my point is,
it does, as the brother already explained.
he said one of the sheikhs.
No, not sheikh.
Told him.
It says, the Quran itself explains, they are allies to each other. There are other verses in the Quran, if I remember correctly. They're allies with each other. Do you not know this phrase? Birds of a feather flock together or something like this? Yeah? Why? Because that's the allies, that's the community which support each other. So when the Quran says about not to take, it is quite understandable and praiseworthy, because in any any relationship in communities of different countries, this is the basis. You take allies, someone who will be in line with your own interests. Someone who does not have the same interest with you, you're not going to take them as your allies.
So would you say that Muslim nations who align, like you're saying about with America and that, align themselves in any way?
Muslim nations should not take allies who would not be their protecting friend. Simple. Yeah. So, but Quran is not saying don't take them as your, compatriot friends and so on in community and so on. No, it says have good relationships with you. In fact, this is one of the essence of living in community. You can have your differences. La ikraha fi din. Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. Why? Because the truth and the error is made distinct and clear. So that's why, my friend, when there were non-Muslims in Islamic lands, when Muslims in an authority, they were thriving. And they lived side by side in Syria. Before this funny event that happened with Assad and so on, there was a church in one side of the road and a mosque on the other side of the road, standing side by side with their service provision to their respective communities for thousands of years. How was that possible? It's the tolerance that Islam provides. You can have your faith, that's it. So it is not that Islam says, you can't have any kind of relationship with other communities. Of course you can. So when...
I don't believe Muslims think that anyway. So, so take a random, if you just take a random scripture and read it, and within itself, you can find the explanation. Is that correct?
No.
That's what you were
To
saying.
give you an example, I've just picked up this. فَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ حِينَ تُمْسُونَ وَحِينَ تُصْبِحُونَ. So glory to Allah in the sun rises and when you enter the morning. وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَعَشِيًّا وَحِينَ تُظْهِرُونَ. And his are the praises and thanks in the heavens and the earth. And in the glorify him in the afternoon and when you come in up to the time when they begin to decline, right? Now,
so what's the point of that? You don't need the hadith then.
Wait. When you read this, you can see whether this makes sense or not. Hadith gives you the details. Remember, the Quran was given...
necessary because...
Let me explain to you. The Quran says to the Prophet, ask the Muslims, tell them.
God says to the Prophet.
Of course, that's what I mean. Pray, establish prayer. Okay? Now, if it told you every single details of how to establish that prayer, what to say in your prayer, the rituals that you have to take to do that prayer, the sequence of events that you have to undertake of the ritual and prayer, the Quran would be, as I said, a book, huge book. The Quran left this لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ, to explain to the people, and the role was to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet. So the Prophet said, pray like you seen me praying. So because he says, the Quran says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. The Prophet, God says, the Prophet does not speak of his own desires. Whatever he says is a revelation sent to him. So God is inspired by God's revelation. He's been inspired by God to teach.
So they then documented how he prayed.
So the Prophet says, this is what you pray. When you pray, you say, Allahu Akbar. And you demonstrate that. So we follow him. He says, he goes, Allahu Akbar, and he goes to bowing. Now, what we say in the bowing, the Prophet said so. Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. And we follow him. Quran doesn't have to explain all of that. So when we accept that the Prophet ﷺ has been given this revelation and the Quran says, go to him, obey Allah and obey the Prophet. Ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul. And Allah says in the Quran, whatever he gives, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Whatever he gives, accept, take from him. Whatever he abstains you to abstain from, you abstain from it. It is the Quranic inductions.
So really, the first Muslims, they had the faith in its, to some extent, in its purest form, because they had the word that had come straight from Muhammad, and they had the examples who walked among them. Good. They could see and observe him and everything.
Now,
Muslims now, it's kind of a secondary.
But here is the beauty. Why I say it's a beauty. We have documentation of the life of the Prophet,
Yeah, the guy was-
not only what he did, but what he didn't do. What do I mean?
So he didn't eat this.
When you
didn't-
speak, do you take pause and breath?
I should, yeah, I should more often.
No, as you're speaking,
Yeah, I do, yeah.
as you're speaking, as I'm speaking,
Yes.
do I say I take moments, pause, breath?
Yep,
It is not my speech, but I also take breath.
yep,
We have documentation even when and how he even take a pause.
yep.
That to that level of detail about what the Prophet said and when he didn't say. This is the level of documentation we have about his life.
So if we run it back to the original thing, the idea of this of faith. When I kept saying faith, you kept saying no. So what would be the role of faith in all of this? Or is there no role at all for faith?
When you say faith, look, we believe in the unseen.
And a belief in the unseen.
Unseen.
Yes,
I haven't seen the Prophet.
yes,
I haven't seen heaven and hell.
yes,
I haven't seen Day of Judgment.
yes,
I haven't seen how the Quran was revealed to the Prophet.
yes,
I have not been witness to any of that.
yes.
So
In
what I have
within there is there the possibility of being wrong? 'Cause this is what we were saying earlier. I was saying about faith, and there's a possibility of being wrong, questioning things, and the guy was saying no.
So what I have is
Is
this,
there that possibility?
No, what I have, as the Quran says,
Yeah.
about the people.
Okay.
The Quran is this book that has been given us guidance,
Yep.
without a doubt, for those who do good deeds. Yeah? Those who believe in the unseen, ghaib,
Yep.
who perform the prayers and gives out, spends what God has given them out of His, provision,
Yep.
and they have certainty in the hereafter.
Yep. So there's no chance of that being.
So we have this faith,
Yeah.
but this faith to the level of certainty. How do we elevate our faith to the level of certainty? To give you an example.
High probability.
No, level of certainty. Certainty comes in several forms and degrees.
Yeah.
One form is, so when we say yaqeen or certainty,
Yeah. Yeah.
one is ilmul yaqeen,
Yeah.
one is ainul yaqeen, one is haqqul yaqeen. What I mean is,
I'll have faith that you're telling me.
certainty of knowledge,
Yeah.
certainty of hearing, seeing, and certainty of actually witnessing, actually seeing this, the reality. For example, I may have absolute knowledge now about something,
Yeah.
but when I actually see it, that's another level of certainty.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I still can have certainty. So, do I see gravity? But I'm certain gravity exists. Why? Because I see the effects of gravity. Not because what I'm told, but I see the effects of it working.
But it started off by being told about gravity.
No, it's not about something told. Why does something fall? You can look at it, think about yourself. Something falls again, if I drop it, it just falls. There seems to be some kind of attractive pull towards here, on this earth. Wherever you go, it's pulling it down. You can experiment everywhere.
That's still based, like I said about the heuristics, it's still based on the fact that scientists or whoever, where did you find out about gravity in the first place?
No, look. You don't have to be a
still based
scientist.
on-
Imagine no scientist tell you.
Yeah.
And you yourself in a desert.
You would know that if you drop something, it would, but you wouldn't know how that happened.
You know there is a force
Force, yeah.
that's driving it down.
Yes, your experience.
You don't see that force,
From
but
experience.
you see the effect.
Yeah.
You don't need to be Newton. Newton is the one who formulated it,
Yes.
but it doesn't mean no one else can understand that.
Yes.
So we can see the effects of this force that I can't see,
Yeah.
and then you say, I'm certain there's something doing that. Now
So
you can.
yeah, there's certainly something doing that, but when it comes to interpreting it, different people may have different interpretations
can say-
of what is causing that.
But you can
Therefore,
say-
that's the level
Fine,
of faith.
but the certainty that there is a thing there that's pulling it down.
Yeah.
That's the level of certainty.
Yeah,
You didn't say,
something
I
happened. Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious.
Yeah.
So when, for example, I mean, look at there's lots of ways you can have certainty. You can have inductive reasoning, deductive.
Yeah, I understand that.
Imagine now there's a room, okay? No windows.
Yep.
It's a concealed everywhere. One door.
Yep.
Everything. The floor is sealed. Excuse me. No escape. The only way to go in and out is by this one door. 4 people went inside. 3 people came out. Would you have certainty who's left inside?
So again, one person's left in there.
Okay. Say For the sake of convenience. For the sake of convenience, right? Abdullah, Abdul Khaliq, Abdul Malik, Abdul Sabur, Abdul Shakur.
Yeah.
3 of them came.
Yeah.
Abdul Khaliq, Abdul Malik, Abdul Sabur. Would you be certain who's left inside?
Nice to meet you, man.
Would you have certainty who's left inside?
Sorry, so again, so 3,
4 people went inside, 3 came out.
I'd have certainty that one, yeah.
But you haven't seen him coming out.
From
though.
experience, I would expect one to come out because I don't know many
You know, 4 people went there.
that would eat the other person maybe, and that could be yeah. There's no walls. There's no doors. There's just walls.
Yeah, if they don't eat,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
They went in and came out straight away.
Yeah.
Would you have a level of certainty who's inside?
Yeah.
What is that process of certainty?
But it could be wrong. I would admit that it could be wrong.
How can it be wrong?
That's the possible. Because there may not be.
May not be what?
There may not be. Sorry.
No,
the
4
fourth
people
person may
went.
not come out.
4 people went, 3 people came out.
Yeah.
That's the only way to go in and out.
No, but if there was no possibility to explain how the other person could have come out, then
No,
you could
I'm
say that.
saying
But there could be. They could chop them
one
up and
person
put
is
them in
left.
there,
Would you be certain who's left?
Yeah, I'd be certain that there was one person.
Yeah, what gives you that certainty?
From my experience, that usually
Yeah,
3 people,
so you're using,
4 people go in.
so as you realize,
Yeah.
certainty can come from various forms of our...
I'm not debating that at all.
Yeah, good.
But I believe my faith.
So-
I believe my religion.
Yeah,
My faith,
so,
and I believe
so
I
when
have
we
some
say we
certainty.
have certainty,
Yeah.
it is not certainty based on blind faith.
Yeah, I understand it.
Right,
Yeah.
so
but
faith-
the way the guy was saying it was that there is no way that he could be wrong, and that's where I was saying.
Yeah, but I'm saying
no, there
the
is
level of certainty on this issue is like the level of certainty that you have in this room, where...
Yeah, for you.
So are you saying 3 of them came and you're still doubtful who's inside?
No, you can't really compare that as an example to.
Why not?
Because I'm there seeing them go in.
Yes,
From,
so
this is talking
likewise-
this is talking about something that happened 1400
Likewise,
years ago.
1400 years ago, you have a living tradition of transmitting of the Quran.
Yeah.
Yeah? Heart to heart, word to word. That's how
Did
you
you see
transmit
them? Because then I could start saying, did you see them write it? And did you see Muhammad tell it to them and they wrote it down? And then you could go into all that. My whole point was that you cannot say that you have a 100%. You can say it, but it's not true. And for any religion, there is that element of faith that has to take you that extra bit. You can have evidence, 100%, strong evidence. You can have etc. But there's that element of faith that takes you that further. And I think also what that does for me anyway is it gives me a little bit of humility. That maybe there are areas maybe I can be wrong. But also gives me a bit of humility in the terms that I can actually learn things from other people and etc. Whilst I believe I have an assurance of faith, and there are evidences, etc. I also accept that there are certain things that I may be wrong, and I won't find out until I
But
get there.
the process of eliminating errors and doubt in this certainty is quite robust.
Yeah,
So we're talking about a community of Muslims. Some of them are even fighting each other.
Yeah.
Like the example that you heard.
Yeah, the Shiite, Sunni
Yeah.
Shiite. Is it Shiite?
What happened? They still have the same Quran.
Yeah.
They transmitted the same Quran.
Yeah.
Every single moment of history, a large body of community who had the Quran transmitted the Quran to us.
Yeah.
So this level of transmission gives us this reasonable faith, which I say is certainty. I cannot have a room for a doubt saying, oh, maybe there is an error. Because the process of this transmission was to this degree, what we call mutawatir, multiple mass transmission by these earliest generations from day one to today, and it's been transmitting still onwards.
Understand.
So if there was a change to happen, the opposing faction will have corrected them or raised an issue. But the fact that we have so many different factions within the Islamic body in history, and yet they transmitted the same Quran, is a living evidence of the purity of the pristine Quran and its preservation in its transmission.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say,
Yeah.
say
That's
I don't know,
why-
take the Vedas or something. I would say in terms of authenticity and I'm not going to say certainty. This would have a stronger case. There'd be more evidence to prove historically there was a person, Muhammad.
So that's one point.
But my whole point is, you're saying certainty. I'm saying there has to be a level of faith.
Okay, sure. I'm
there
not
is a
saying there's no
possibility
faith.
of being
No.
wrong.
Don't get me wrong.
That's it.
I did not say there is no level of
I could be
faith.
wrong.
I did not say it's faith. There is no level of faith. There is faith, but this faith is reasonable, rooted, and based on solid evidence. My second point, after talking about the transmission, if
Well,
had
we
this
just had a
Quran,
conversation because that's the conversation I was having. The guy was saying, no, faith. No. We know this is. I cannot be wrong. He said.
yes, why you can't be wrong? This is where it comes in. My second point: if the Quran had been not transmitted exactly as the Prophet transmitted it, then people should be able to point out the corruption within it and able to match the Quran. Because the Quran says if this Quran wasn't from God, from Allah, then you'll be able to bring a chapter like it or a Quran like it or 10 chapters like it, right? So any corruption would have rendered it easy to match the Quran. Because if the divine text is such a way guarded against any imitation because of the structure of the language, of the eloquence, of the meaning, of the grammar, of the way it's delivered, any corruption of that would render it what? Weak. And a hole pointed inside, and you can say, I can match something like that. The fact that over 1,500 years almost, people are failing and have failed is a living evidence that the Quran is exactly how it was given to the Prophet and transmitted such was. The words of God as the Prophet claimed.
Not once did I say I don't think there's a possibility that came perfect.
So that's the level of certainty in our faith.
My whole argument was the fact that there are various sects who interpret it in different ways, to me shows that although this is perfect, you cannot say that my particular sect 100% has it correct and right.
You're talking about interpretation.
Because as human beings...
No, I agree with you.
That's the main thing.
I agree with you. There are many various groups of people who differently interpret
If I
it.
said there's a possibility that my interpretation may be wrong, I would have been, okay, fine.
Sure.
Because I can accept that my interpretation, even of Christianity...
I agree with you to this point, that people can interpret differently and have interpreted differently. But we should go for... Now here's my caveat. We should go for the best interpretation. There's many interpretations people can make, depending on their level of understanding of the text. But there is a best interpretation of the text. Yeah? There are interpretations and there are best interpretation. We should all try to get the best interpretation. That's my position. That's the position of every Muslim should be. That the Quran should not be interpreted according to your own whims and desires. You shouldn't interpret the Quran because, you know what, you believe that you are a rationalist. So you can't believe in the unseen angels, or you can't believe in the jinns. And you say, you know what, the jinns are like microbes that go inside your body and give you disease. No, you can't do that. You have to interpret according to the best interpretation. Allah says which is the best interpretation. So how did the Quran interpret it?
You'd say angels and that are...
They are not microbes.
of angels are... That's how they are. That's the image.
The angels are described in the Quran.
It's literal.
And it's described by the Prophet. They're not microbes.
No.
So So what I'm saying is, just give you an arbitrary example. There are people who actually said something like this. Not angels, jinns. Shaitan, right? Shaitan is like a microbe. You know, they're causing you disease and making you to do these things. Some rationalists to do that. But that is going against the clear text of the scripture, the Quran, and the explanation by the Prophet. Okay? So the best interpretation is what we should follow, not what I think the interpretation should be. Okay? So the safest position is following the best interpretation, isn't it?
Okay.
So our position is, yes, people have interpreted, like some of the Sufis interpret it, oh, it means this. Oh, you have to do this, do that. No connection to the text whatsoever. No connection. If you read this text and they say it means this, you'll be saying, where do you get that from? You say, oh, I have my understanding. But you'll say, your interpretation is not in line with the best interpretation. Yeah. So, my friend, now to come to the Quran in a nutshell. I know you are a rational person and you understand at least the process of the transmission of the Quran and the process of preservation of the Quran. This Quran, think about it. If it wasn't from God and it came to this person, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have to have a rational explanation of what this Quran is if it's not from God. Yeah? If you don't accept it's from God, we have to have a rational explanation to justify our belief why it's not from God. Yeah? So, we need to be quite open, using our mind with a framework in which we do a very good assessment of that. How do we justify rationally? Yeah? Without bringing our baggage of prejudice, hatred or bigotry. Some people may have this hatred of the Quran because it's in Arabic language, they don't like Arabic language. Or because the Prophet was an Arab and they are not Arabs. So our own subjective understanding can be barriers in accepting the Quran. We want to leave these all aside. We want to say no. If the Quran is from God as a guidance to us, I want to accept it or reject it if it's not. So how am I going to be able to do that without bringing any biases? Yeah. So the Quran says this Quran is such that it cannot be produced by anything else other than God. It makes a claim. And it also not only makes a claim, it gives you and offers you falsifiability, falsification tests to prove it that it's not from God. Because it's quite understanding that if a book is not from God and talks about so many different things of the past, present and the future, talks about nations in the past, what they believed, where they went wrong, talks about the cosmos, how the cosmos works, it talks about your own inner self, what you think, what you don't think. These are some examples, right? So many things.
But some of those things are general.
No, I'm saying it talks about a wide variety of things. If it wasn't from God, you would expect to have many discrepancies, contradictions, and errors, because that's what human mind is able to produce a book of this nature. A book, if it was a book of only 2 lines, then you can say, okay, the possibility of making an error there is very, very less. But if you have a book over 600 pages, actually this is even more, right? Talking about so many different things, talking about even predicting things to come in the future, talking about histories that people didn't know then, that may people know in the future afterwards. The possibility of making errors is quite high. Why is it that when we examine this Quran and we apply this falsifiability, the falsification test, it stands up in the scrutiny?
I think it could be inspired by unseen whatever. I don't see any point in it. I don't see any reason not to think that. But my whole point was then when it comes to the interpretation of it.
Look.
I think.
How can you interpret?
Not just have that? Like you said, it can interpret itself. So why does someone need the hadith to interpret it? If this, as Muhammad gave this, that's what he gave.
And he explained it.
He gave that.
And he explained it.
Therefore, then you can say no, but the hadith, it's like Abu Bakari and these guys. They've then explained it and told you.
No. So you have a fundamental misunderstanding of the hadith. Bukhari and Muslim did, or other characters of the hadith, they didn't write it from their own mind what the Prophet said. They're collectors and transmitters.
I was calling you because of that thing. He said, approve me 5 pillars of Islam in Quran. So he was not getting a right answer. So I was waiting for you when you finished.
What's your name?
Mansur.
Mansur, nice to speak to you. I need to shoot. Yeah, bless you.
Are you going to come and visit Speaker School again? If you do, we can carry on this conversation.
Yeah, although I said to we're just going to go and listen. But
Do you have a copy of the Quran at home?
I have one, yeah. I've got a copy.
Carry on reading.
I don't know what translations I have. But
As many translations you like, choose to broaden the understanding of the meaning. Yeah? And we talk again. Take care.
So they were discussing about 5 pillars of Islam.
Yeah.
So he wanted to know where is